The American dream was to create a few very rich people, that was part of the American dream. And greed began to be taught in business schools. And it pervades boardrooms today. That's the objective, make a few people very, very rich. And so the system began to evolve. But at the same time, we had this aversion to colonialism, to empire, to imperialism. We said we had an aversion. We didn't like what Hitler had done. We began to look back and say, well, what those conquistadores did, and the British and the French and everybody else, that wasn't good. But in fact, we were still living in that system. So it started in Iran when Mossadegh was elected democratically as president of Iran in the early 50s, and he began to nationalize oil companies, and we didn't like that. So we decided we had to get rid of him, and we sent in a CIA agent, Kermit Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt's grandson, and he was extremely successful at getting rid of this democratically elected president of Iran and replacing him with a terrible dictator, the Shah. But he did it very quietly. He did it with a few $1 million and without much violence and without the risk of war with the Soviet Union. And at that point, we feared nuclear war with the Soviet Union. And so this sent a really strong message. This works. This is the new way to build empire. Use economic hitmen. Kermit Roosevelt was, in essence, the first economic hitman. He was also a jackal. He was the two combined. But he was a CIA agent, a card-carrying government employee, and so very quickly we realized that that's no good. What if he'd been caught, and we would have looked pretty bad. So we developed a new class of people, which were like me. We work for private companies, consulting firms, whatever, and we're economic hitmen. In essence, we work for the corporatocracy, the government, but we're not paid directly by them. We're paid by a consulting firm. You know, we economic hitmen have many vehicles to make this happen, but perhaps the most common one is that we will identify a country, usually a developing country, that has resources we covet, our corporations covet, like oil. And then we arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. Now, most everybody in our country believes that that loan is going to help poor people. It isn't. Most of the money never goes to the country. In fact, it goes to our own corporations. It goes to the Bechtels and the Halliburtons and the ones we all hear about, usually led by engineering firms, but a lot of other companies are brought in. And they make fortunes off building big infrastructure projects in that country. Power plants, industrial parks, ports, those types of things. Things that don't benefit the poor people at all. They're not connected to the electrical grid. They don't get the jobs in the industrial parks because they're not educated enough. But they, as a class, are left holding a huge debt. The country goes deep into debt in order to make this happen. And a few of its wealthy people get very rich in the process. They own the big industries that do benefit from the ports and the highways and the industrial parks and the electricity. The country's left holding this huge debt that it can't possibly repay. So at some point, we economic hitmen go back in and we say, you know, you can't pay your debts. You owe us a pound of flesh. You owe us a big favor. So sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies, or vote with us on the next critical United Nations vote, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world like Iraq. And so we use this whole process as, first of all, getting their money, basically, money we loan them, to enrich our own corporations, and then to use the debt to enslave them, to imprison them, to get them to have to agree to selling off their resources cheap. It's an amazing system, and in the process of doing that, we have, in essence, created this empire. And we've done it without the military, without most citizens knowing that it ever happened. In fact, most citizens believing we've done a great thing. We've spent billions of dollars on building an electrical system, industrial parks, and so on and so forth. We've given this country a huge gift. And the truth of the matter is exactly the opposite of that. We've given this country, we've put this country in a terrible, terrible situation, a terrible predicament. A few of its wealthy people have made a lot of money, and they've invested in real estate in Florida or Swiss banks or stock markets overseas. They've taken their money out of the country, and they've become very rich. And if something goes wrong in the country, they just leave. But the other people are left holding this huge debt, and as a result, They can't afford the education systems, the water and sewage systems that they need, the health care and all the other civil amenities that they need. And of course that in turn feeds the whole system, so we can go back in later and offer another loan to privatize their education system or to develop their sanitation system, and the process is repeated and repeated and repeated, and it just keeps going on. It's very effective. It's a very effective way of building an empire.
Ramon, clear the whites out. All of them.
Fora, fora na rua. Fora, vamos, toque para fora. Rua, vamos já, fora. Olha, vocês aqui acabaram, vai embora. Acabou com vocês aí. Vai embora, todo mundo aí, não quero ver mais ninguém aí. Vamos, ainda estão aí? Vai embora. Rua.
Who'll govern your island, Jose? Who'll run your industries? Who'll handle your commerce? Who'll cure the sick? Teach in your schools? This man? Or that man? Or the other? Civilization is not a simple matter, Jose. You cannot learn its secrets overnight. Today's civilization belongs to the white man, and you must learn to use it. Without it, you cannot go forward.
But to go where, English? It's better that you too go away. Inglés! Remember what you said. Civilization belongs to whites. But what civilization? Until when?